Everyone else is usually on the bottom, but today it's all about you. So I'm so excited you're here. I won't be as good as you, but I will try because we are loving your industry interviews. My husband Dan keeps walking in. He's like, she's awesome. I'm like, I know.
I pay him to say that, you know.
Yeah, whatever. We'll take all just Venmo, all the no worries. I was gonna curl my hair for you, but could not make it happen. So.
I like it straight. It looks good.
But I am wearing the All Saints shirt that you gave me.
Yes.
Love it. Since I don't have anywhere to go, I'm like, yes, I'm gonna dress up today for Melissa. I wore
my hair is getting longer and longer and longer, so that means the height has to go up.
I was like,
not down here.
I was gonna ask you if you cut your hair because I know how in dire times you will cut your own hair. So
I did. I feel like it's a slippery slope when it's short. If it's long, I'm fine cutting it, but when it's short, it's kind of a slippery slope.
Like that time you chopped your hair off. How much did you cut off? When you just like, remember, were you in a trailer? Where were you? That you just chopped your whole head off?
That would be my first time living in New York. I went from hair that was about this length to a pixie cut in my very first sublet in Washington Heights because they had a trifold mirror.
Right. It was the trifold mirror. I was like, I love pictures like you with like the mirror and just being like, yeah, I could cut the back, pixie cut, not a trim, just living her best life.
Oh, so yeah. We went full like Emma Watson.
Oh yeah, you went. No, I can't even trim my own hair. So bravo, but you're the hair expert. So all the things. I'm so glad you're here. I miss you.
I miss you too.
What are you wearing? Let me see.
Sparkles.
Oh, of course, sparkle. I couldn't do that for you. I'll go black with a little bit of shine, only because it's All Saints. But you know, occasionally I do a little bit for you. So, all right. So first thing, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, Melissa, where you grew up, kind of your story from little tiny Melissa to now, just like a quick summary so we can get to know you. I think that's been one of the coolest things about your interview is that all the faculty I feel like I know and I've been friends with for years. And then as soon as they start talking, I'm like, I didn't even know that about them. So this has been really cool. So it's your turn. All right. Tell me a little bit about the Melissa story.
Okay. So I'm from a small town in southern Louisiana called Abita Springs. It is about 45 minutes away from New Orleans. So it was near a city, but it was still a really small town. Like we didn't even have a stoplight. My dance studio that I grew up at was one radio song away from my house. I clocked it. It was Mary D's Dance Studio. That's how I met Casey. I grew up there from age 2.5 all the way through high school. I was a recreational student for many years, and then we started doing dance competitions when I was 11, I believe. And then when we started doing competitions, we started going to intensives and conventions. And then I got into summer training programs, which escalated my training, I would say, very rapidly because I was spending more time in a focused environment rather than just like weekdays going to class. But I was the kind of dancer that was constantly at the studio. So I was there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, like every single day that we had class. We had optional Saturdays. I would be there every single day. Fast forward, I've been doing summer programs. I'm a teenager. And then I start looking at what it would be like to have a career as a dancer and what I would need to do. And with guidance from mentors like you, I decided to go to college for dance. And so I went to Indiana University, and at the time they offered a Bachelor of Science in Dance and Kinesiology in contemporary style. So kinesiology is the scientific study of movement. It's what a lot of physical therapists, athletic trainers, PE coaches, like anyone who deals with movement in the body. We learned a lot about biomechanics, motor learning, a lot of a different perspective about the body and dancing. And it was a modern and contemporary based program, and that was in Indiana. So that was the first time that I probably left Louisiana for an extended period of time. And I was there for 2 years. Then I studied abroad, which was a wonderful experience. I highly recommend it if you ever have the opportunity to do so, to study abroad. I went to Israel and lived in Jerusalem for a year and studied at the Hebrew University as well as the Jerusalem Academy of Music and Dance. So I was able to have a lot of freedom in my training when I was in Israel. And I studied all sorts of styles, including what Israel is very well known for in the contemporary community, a style called Gaga. And I also, funnily enough, studied a lot of American modern dance when I was in Israel. I was doing Graham, I was doing Horton, I was doing Cunningham, so many different styles that you would have thought I would be studying more of in America, but each program is different. One interesting thing about being in Israel was during that time, I started doing aerial training. And that's because I grew up at my hometown studio doing tumbling. And then in my university training, I wasn't given the opportunity to keep up with that through classwork. And then when I went to Israel, I was like, oh, I really miss tumbling and I want to keep that tool. So how am I going to do that? So I reached out to the Jerusalem Circus while I was there.
Of course you did.
And I, just so everyone knows, I'm not Jewish, so I didn't speak Hebrew before I went to Israel. And a lot of people speak English, but everything is written in Hebrew and Arabic. So I was a mess. I was a hilarious mess, but I learned a lot about the world and I learned a lot about myself. So I traded with the Jerusalem Circus and I taught acro to their younger students. And also I taught in English so that they could train their students to learn acro in English. And then they traded aerial classes for payment because they weren't allowed to pay me because I was a student.
Right.
I didn't have a work visa. So anyway, fast forward, I finished my time in Israel, which was incredible. I finished my senior year in Indiana. And then I take like 3 months back in Louisiana before I moved to New York. I moved to New York. Shortly after I moved, I cut my hair into a pixie cut, as we were talking about earlier. And I basically went nuts in New York and I tried everything. And I trained in aerial. I did the work study program at Steps on Broadway. Love the work study program. So beneficial. I very much so overloaded myself though. I was taking 3-4 classes a day and working like 4 or 5 jobs and running around like a chicken with my head cut off. And I wasn't, I wouldn't say that I would go back and change that, but it is a much different experience my first time living in New York compared to now. So I was there for about 2 years and then I found myself kind of being not focused in why I went to New York. And a piece of advice that you actually gave me, which I hold on to and I share very often, is that you move to a big city so that you can work in your field. You don't work doing other things like your side hustles, like dog walking and bartending and all the things. You don't do all of those things just so that you can stay in New York, because you moved there in order to dance for a living or perform or what have you. So it's very important.
You were like working at the bar till like 2 a.m. and then going to the like work at the gym at like 5:30 or 6 a.m. Like you weren't even sleeping. Like you were just like this hamster wheel of like working and trying to make it to an audition, which was almost impossible to make it to class or auditions, which was nice being at Steps. But like you literally, there was no time for Melissa in there. It was just the hustle.
I was like,
I'm like, all over the place. You're like working every 5, like I couldn't even, it's crazy. Sorry.
I know. It was bananas. So I left New York because I wasn't focused and I wasn't doing what I went there to do. And I moved to New Orleans proper. I had never lived there before, but I was familiar with it. Family was close by and I wanted to see what the Southern industry had to offer. So when I was in New Orleans, I started teaching for my hometown studio and I would do the reverse commute. So I would drive to the North Shore, Abita Springs, Covington area, and I would teach and then I would bartend and then I was saving up money, right, so that I could move again. And then I started getting into TV and film because at the time they had passed a legislature for a film incentive to kind of like boost the economy. And they were trying to make New Orleans the Hollywood of the South. Now, we all know that Atlanta's the Hollywood of the South, but New Orleans was trying to mimic the same process. So a lot of big name shows were coming to shoot in New Orleans. And I started getting into background work, and I booked my first TV and film job down there in New Orleans. And then I also expanded my aerial training because it was so much more affordable when I was in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. I tried to get into the art scene that was down there, but it wasn't as, I want to say it wasn't as flavorful and saturated dance-wise. There were opportunities, but they were all things that you would have to do on your own. And I felt that I was at the point in my career where I could still learn so much by being in professional experiences that other people were in charge of. Mm-hmm. For example, when I was in New Orleans, I ended up casting, choreographing, performing, outfitting, and pretty much producing an entire dance industrial for Southwest Airlines. And I was 22. And I'm not saying that I didn't do a good job. You know, it was a wonderful experience and it was very successful, but I was basically learning as I was doing it. And I mean, I'm not afraid of a challenge, as you know, but I think that I would grow more and become an all-around stronger artist and a stronger asset to our industry if I have more opportunity to learn from people who are more experienced than I am. So I also met my boyfriend, George, in New Orleans.
Also known as the CDI IT director.
CDI IT department, yes. And we decided to move to New York because he had always wondered what it would be like to live there. And as soon as he let that little piece of information slip, I was like, great, we're going to move in 6 months. Yeah. And so then we moved to New York. And since it was my second time around, I decided that I would do things differently. And
you had to save some money, right? It was a little bit easier to like go home, save some money. So when you went back to New York, you had a little like savings cushion rather than
a nest egg.
Yes. Which is good advice for heading to New York.
Big difference. Really big difference. You have to have the freedom to audition and take class and do what you went to New York to do rather than your side hustle. And I don't knock just moving here with a little bit of money. Like if you feel like you can do it, do it. But for me, I get very invested in what I spend my time doing. So oftentimes I say, oh, I actually like really enjoy like, you know, being in customer service and, you know, the social aspect of bartending and all these different opportunities. And I could be happy like doing those things, but that's not what I came here to do.
Right.
And I'm not very good at excuse my French, I'm not very good at half-assing something. So it's better for me to do strictly what I came here to do and manage my other responsibilities with a very strict mindset. And so that's where I am now. I work in TV and film, theater, and industrials mostly. But I have a range of styles that I perform, and it's been a really exciting ride. I also, just a little quick, you know, overview, I met you and In-House Productions, which is now Commercial Dance Intensive, when I was 12, right? and
But you sent me your resume and headshot when you were 13, maybe, I think, formatted. If you need help, if you ever need it, I am here. I was like, slow clap. That was amazing. So I would have hired you at 13 if it had not been for the child labor laws and you being in school. But
right. So then fast forward, and I started assisting you and traveling with you, and then I became your assistant, and then now I'm your director of operations for the Commercial Dance Intensive.
Direct all things, all the things. There's nothing not under your umbrella. Melissa does all of it. Quick side question before we move on, because I thought this was interesting that you pointed out. So when you were at Indiana for the 2 years, and then you went and did more circus heavy and modern in Israel, and then you came back and did a year at Indiana after that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Were you able to still keep up your acro and circus training once you got back into Indiana, or were you just like, I mean, because I know a lot of kids are so acro heavy right now in their studios, and then they go to college, and, you know, I don't know if you were able to find that, or is there a way for them to keep up their acro circ stuff, you know, when they're out of the studio environment where they were getting it every day? And they don't teach acro at college. It's like, you know, trying to find hip hop and tap. It's very, very difficult. So is there something that you did, or that you wish you had been able to do, you know, kind of with your acro and circ in college?
I made a regimen for myself, and I added it to my course load, but it was not something that I could find elsewhere. I had to be responsible for keeping up with those skills. I reached out to, you know, the gymnastics center at our school, and I was like, hey, could I come into the space, you know, like once a week and, you know, use this space? I'll sign a waiver, whatever you need me to do. I'm certified, you know, to be safe, like yada, yada, yada. And so I had to take it upon myself to keep up with those skills, and the opportunity didn't present itself. I sought it out, and I just asked, you know, and I asked the department, I was like, do you mind? Would you be okay if I did this? And they were like, yeah, sure. Go knock yourself out, but don't knock yourself out, because we're liable.
You like show up with your lira, like, can I rig this to your bars, please? Sorry, I know how to do it.
I mean, that's what I did at Equinox. You know?
Yeah, I did show up with that hoop and be like, I'm just gonna click in here. I'm certified. So all the things. So now here you are, stuck in New York. We'll get to that later, but now, my first, as you would say, here's your first official industry interview question. How did you book your first job, and how did it feel when you found out you had booked it?
So I'm going to talk about the first job that I booked the second time living in New York, because that was the first one that was a true audition to book to like continued work situation.
Yeah.
So it was my second time living in New York. As you know, I was bartending at night, working at Equinox in the morning, going to auditions. I was musical theater, tunnel vision, right? I was like, I came to New York to sing and dance, and we are going to do this. And I was going to open calls, and I was crashing ECCs, as they call it, and, you know, doing everything that I possibly could to show up for those specific shows and jobs that I was aiming for, right?
5 a.m., writing your name on the piece of paper, sticking it to the wall.
Yep. And then asking to leave work for 10 minutes to go sign in again when they didn't honor the list, and then go back. So anyway, let's rewind for 1 second. So in college, I was introduced to a lot of modern dance companies, and I fell in love in particular with a company called Pilobolus.
Yes.
And they're an incredible company. I would say you could categorize them as dance theater. So they are super story oriented in a lot of their work. They're known mainly as a repertory company, and they travel and they tour and they do, you know, performances at the Joyce. And then in like the 2000s, they started doing commercial work. So different companies would hire them for creative movement purposes for their products, right? So Pilobolus was doing more and more and more of that work. Now we'll fast forward. In college, I loved Pilobolus. I was like, I want to be in a modern dance company. I want to be in Pilobolus, right?
And they do a lot of acro and like,
yes,
very much towards your skill set.
Yes, acro, partnering. It's amazing. So great. And they're so strong too.
Yeah.
And a lot they tell a story.
Yeah, would recognize them for their shadow work. So they're the company that sort of spearheaded and it's a car, and back, and it's an elephant, and all made out of bodies. So anyway, got their commercial in was the really cool sort of creative aspect. But go ahead.
Right. So I had gone to summer programs for Pilobolus in college because I was very interested in their company. My first time living in New York, I auditioned for them. I made it to the second round and then wasn't kept. But I loved them so, so much. I left New York, moved back to New York. I'm musical theater focused, and I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. I came here to do this. And I'm working at Equinox. You know, I had just gotten off a shift from the bar at like 3 a.m. and then was at the gym at 5:25 a.m. And my friend Dylan Spicer, she came and she was like coming to teach an athletic, you know, fitness class at Equinox, like a group fitness class. And she was like, hey, do you mind printing out my resume for me here at the desk? Actually, I'm going to this audition for Pilobolus. You should go. And I was like, oh, when is it? And she was like, it's today. And I was like, what time? And it just was like, oh, I mean, like, why not? There's not another ECC. I know that they're not seeing girls like me at this show. Like, I get off at 10. What time is their audition? And so she was like, it's at 10. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know, why not? Because I know in the past, having auditioned for them, it's kind of like a workshop because they work with you on the movement and it's a long audition. Yeah. So I ran home. I got off work early. I ran home, got clothes, got my headshot and resume. I had my bag ready to go, just like CDI taught me. And I just ran, right? I grabbed some food and I went. And then I showed up to the audition and they were like, Melissa, hi, because they know me from the intensives, right? And so I go through the entire day from 10 to 6 p.m., right? And then they say, okay, great, we'll see you back here tomorrow. And the first part of their audition is improvisation. And then the second part of that day is like athletic improvisation. So they ask you to include like certain skills, like power skills and things like that. And then day 2, you are put together with both male and female. And they say, okay, so now we're going to partner. And so you spend like the whole morning partnering and doing like overhead lifts and all of these really exciting moves, right? And then they say, you know, great, we'll have you come back like one last round. So second full day, it's about like 4 o'clock, right? And they got it down to like 11 of us. And they said, okay, great. So we just want to let you guys know that we don't have any like open spots in the company right now. But, you know, sometimes we get work and like we would love to have like people ready to go if we need them. So if you think about it, you've just spent like 2 full days. You've rearranged your whole schedule. I mean, you got a free workshop. Let's give it that, you know. But you just went through this whole process, like you're partnering with strangers and you're like killing your body. You're like, yeah, let's go, tumble, flip, jump, blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, oh, we're not hiring. And you're like, okay. But, you know, we all kept good attitudes about it because we were like, great, thank you so much. Like, what an honor to be here. Really important to be graceful when you don't get something or when it's not what you expected it to be, right? So then I left and I was like, wow, you know, I haven't done movement like that in a long time. I've been doing 16-bar cuts for musical theater calls and like trying to tap dance my behind into an audition room at Pearl Studios. And I just spent like 2 days hardcore auditioning for this super athletic company that used to be my dream company. What's happening? Yeah. So then fast forward 2 days and I get a phone call and they say, hey, I know that we said that we weren't necessarily hiring, but we just got a gig that's happening in Vegas next week. Would you like to go? Yes. And I said, yes, I'm available and I would like to go. Thank you.
Yes. Let me check my, I'm available.
So then I started working for Pilobolus, doing sort of their creative services work. So for commercial entities, when the dancers for Pilobolus who are doing the rep, when they are on tour, they use other dancers that are well-versed in the Pilobolus movement style, as well as the athletic needs that they have. They call people, and then, you know, you have different opportunities. And what's cool about it is that they're always different, and you can usually travel with it. With Pilobolus, I've been able to dance internationally, and I've also been able to meet some very, very talented dancers and producers, and just had the opportunity to do some really unique work. And I feel very fortunate that that was my first professional experience.
Yeah. And it's awesome that, you know, sort of traditionally you think contemporary company, like this is going to be concert dance. And what you ended up doing was commercial dance, you know, like it really was commercial. Industrial is like straight up commercial. And you were flying through the air, you had on light, you know, there's like so that, you know, traditionally, and I think a lot of the concert companies, the big ones, are moving in that direction of, you know, being relevant and trying to find new ways to do that. And I think Pilates is a great example of how to take technically modern, contemporary trained dancers and really make it commercial. I mean, on TV, in the movies, you know, like you said, performing.
I mean, they were on the Academy Awards.
Yeah, so cool. And so you enjoyed your first real job?
Living the dream. Living the absolute dream. Like the whole time I would show up early and I'd be like, okay, I'm
ready. 2 hours early.
Do you need me to be in a headstand for 6 hours? I got it. Whatever you need.
Killing me. I love it. I know
Super eager, very happy to be there, ready to work. You know, learned a lot, of course.
All right. Second question. What is something in your career that surprised you? Maybe that you didn't expect, or either generally about business, or maybe something specific that you encountered along the way that you kind of were like, oh, that was not what I expected.
Yes. Okay. So I don't want this answer to sound shady. I come from like a very humble heart saying this.
Nothing you can say sounds shady. I'm shady. You're nice. Go ahead.
You don't have to be the strongest dancer to book the job, and you don't have to be the one with the perfect technique or the legs and the flexibility. You know, all of those things help, obviously, but I have found that it's much, much, much more important in the industry to be a good person to be around, to work with, someone who shows up, someone who's positive and dedicated. Once you book that first job, they will keep coming because you're a joy to work with, not because you're a flawless technician. And alongside that, it was also surprising to me how much networking and knowing someone can influence if you get a job. Not saying that people who get jobs that way don't deserve it. I don't mean that whatsoever. It's just such a huge factor that when you are showing up and giving your all, but you don't know anyone and no one's worked with you before, that's the hardest part about breaking into the industry. So my recommendation about that information is to show up and do some work for people pro bono so that they understand your energy and what you can offer besides your talent and technique, because those are the things that stand out, because there's so many talented dancers. Everyone can do a triple pirouette and kick their leg and all the things.
Yeah.
But who do you want to spend like 8 hours with? Who do you want to fly internationally with and handle their crazy like after hours? Like that's the sort of thing that people will bring you back for.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. And I mean, you came from the world of competition dance, you know, and you grow up your whole life, and the winner is the most talented dancer, is the most artistic dancer, is the one who did the most turns and had the most acro and had the most, you know, the best choreography and the best costume. And I think it, you know, it takes a while, like you said, because I didn't come as much from that background because I'm older than you, wasn't really a thing. You know, but especially this generation that is coming in now is exactly what you said. And it takes a while to realize, and for parents too, because, you know, they're sort of conditioned to think that like the best dancer, the one who's winning platinum, the one who's winning first overall is the one actually going to make it. And I think like you said, it's such good insight from you of you get to New York and you're like, wait, we all were Miss, Louisiana title winners. We were all we were all junior soloists,
Yeah.
Now what happens? Now that the playing field is level, technique wise, it's the hustle and the networking and, but like you said, it's definitely surprising those first couple months when you realize that it's not about the talent. I mean, it's part of it, but there's so much more that they don't teach you. I mean,
it's a lot of patience.
CDI, had you been at CDI, you would have known.
It didn't exist.
It didn't exist. All right.
I had CDI 1.0, just being attached at your side all the time. Casey, what do I do?
You had the be real for behind. Okay. What is the one skill or style that you wish you had developed before you became a professional?
Okay, I have two. I'm cheating. I created the questions. I can cheat.
I was about to say, these are your questions. You can do whatever you want with them. You can speak. I don't care. Go.
So my first thing, obviously, I would have stuck with voice training. Hands down. I would have been so much more comfortable as a musical theater performer if I had stayed with my vocal training from a young age.
Did you voice a little bit as a kid, or were you like chorus and kind of?
Yeah, I was in a choir. I sang at church, and I sang a lot personally. I actually wanted to be a singer when I was a kid before I wanted to be a dancer. I wanted to be Shania Twain, Britney Spears, LeAnn Rimes, all of those goodies. Robbie says, me too.
Robbie's still trying to be Kelly Clarkson, but go ahead.
Well, all in good time. And then my second, I really wish that I had trained in before I became a professional was partnering. I love partnering so much. And So You Think You Can Dance came around when I was a teenager. And it was so exciting to see the partnering that was happening because all the couples would dance together, right? And I just wanted to do it so much, but I didn't necessarily have the opportunity to do so. It was a small studio. The only boy that we had was younger than me. And I liked also in tumbling that I would be the base for a lot of the acro power skills that we would do that was partnering. And I enjoyed that a lot, but I wish that I had been able to do like social dance partnering as well as like high lift partnering.
Right.
Before becoming a professional, because that's something that you kind of learn on the spot. Yeah. And if you have the opportunity to work in that department, it's such a great skill to have. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting, and you were sort of in that conversation with Cassidy, Brandon, and Robbie when we added partnering into CDI, because it was like, how do we, being in the partnering field, and it's part of what you're used to, especially doing acro, because ballet partnering is all about trusting the male dancer, and it's not about the female. The female dancer is, being spotlighted. And then, Brandon does his contemporary partnering, which is like what you said, completely 50-50. How do you share weight? How, can the female lift the male? And then Cassidy comes in and does commercial partnering, which is complete connection. How do you play off each other? How do you create characters? How do you actually look at each other? And it's not so much about lifting, it's about being a partner.
Right.
And that's interesting to say that, because I feel like in every facet of the dance world, there's partnering, but we don't, unless you get to college, I think there's not a lot of partnering training, coming up. And since you've been sitting in this chair every couple days with different people, what do you think is sort of, what would you say are the most popular answers to that question that everyone else has said?
A lot of our industry professionals are saying they wish that they had kept up with vocal training. Acting is huge. So many people have said acting and acro. A lot of people have said they wish that they had those special skills. Yeah. Because especially the way that the industry is turning, so many people can do a lot of those skills. But to be a well-rounded technical dancer, you need one of those things. You need to be a compelling actor that can tell a story to sell a product or to sell an artist or to sell your story and performance. You need the acro because, you know, there's so much flair happening now. And then vocally, musical theater, you have to have that.
Yeah. And I think you're such a good example of, you're never one of those people that's like, well, that wasn't offered, or, you know, we didn't get that at my studio. Like, there's no excuses with you. You're like, then just go find it. Go to church and find a vocal director, you know, learn you know, on the internet. Didn't you just buy a keyboard so you could like learn piano? I mean, you know, like, rather than sitting at home and being, you know, complaining or saying like, I can't do something. Yeah. You're like, you know what, I'm going to buy a keyboard and I'm going to like, you know, refresh my piano skills. And I think
George has invested in some really great headphones.
You guys stuck in that apartment. But I think that's so great about you is that you were in multiple situations, sort of, you know, either stuck in a small town or in college where you weren't, you know, didn't have the access to big city classes and those type of things. And I think you've been so good at, you know, not saying like, well, we didn't have it. My college didn't offer that. My studio didn't offer that, you know, but how can you make it work? Because you can always make it work, you know.
Thank you.
And they don't, you know, most studios don't teach voice, don't teach acting. And, you know, acro is so popular now, but it wasn't. And so it's a lot of my generation that you've interviewed that were all like, we didn't take acro. It wasn't a thing. Like, you were a gymnast or you were a dancer and there wasn't, you know, an in between. And so we're jealous of you guys because, I mean, you're the acro queen and it has opened so many more doors for you.
Huge.
Oh, and it's too late for us. I'm not going to try to do it back answer. It's too late. So I appreciate that from you, and you're such a good example to all of our dancers, CDI and everywhere, that, you know, don't waste the time and don't make excuses. There's always a way, you know, there's always a way to get better, and, you know, don't depend on somebody else for your education. I think that's been your sort of mantra, is like, you are in charge of Melissa, and Melissa's going to be a badass. Like, she's going to have to do it on her own. No one's doing it for her.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. If you could go back in time and talk to little Melissa at 15, what would you tell her? What advice? What does current Melissa have for little Melissa?
So I kind of loved who I was at 15. It was a great time for me. I think I took a lot of ownership at that age. And some advice that I would give my 15-year-old self, one is trust your intuition. You feel a certain way for a reason, and you have those instincts because of the people that you surround yourself with. And that brings me to my second piece of advice, is be very mindful who you surround yourself with and who you invest your energy in, because I'm the kind of person that puts a lot of energy out, and I had to, at a later point in my life, turn my energy inward to focus on myself and to connect with that intuition that I had at a younger age, because we get very, I want to say distracted. You know, we get distracted by all the expectations that are out there. It's like, this is what the career looks like. This is what your future should look like. This is what your life should be if you want this, that, and the other. But no one's life is the same. No one's path is the same, and they shouldn't be, honestly, because we're all individuals. So I would tell my 15-year-old self, trust your instincts and be mindful of who you invest your energy in, and work towards investing more in yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like you lose that little bit of confidence and that like balls to the wall, like, I got this, I don't care who's watching, you know, and then you get very much like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be. So, but you're amazing. All right. Do you have any advice for the next generation of dancers, especially right now? So sort of segueing into that, where are you right now? Where have you been? I think maybe from Fireside to now, kind of how that affected you. And then because of your current situation, what you would tell the dancers, because you are living it way even worse than a lot of us.
So I was doing a show at the Fireside Theater. It was my first professional equity show that I was lucky to be a part of. And I was doing Guys and Dolls there. I had a little role, which was very exciting. My first time having a named character. And we were in our performance run of the show. We had done about 2 weeks, and then we found out everything that was going down. And this was the week before St. Patrick's Day, and Broadway closed. And we said, oh no, Broadway closed.
Never a good sign when you find out all of Broadway is closed.
So, you know, like our hearts went out to them, but we were like, oh, we're in the Midwest. We're in a small town, Wisconsin. We should be fine. So then we were like on this roller coaster of like, we're going to stay open. No, we're going to close. We're going to stay open. And then on Sunday, they announced that we would be closing. And the Fireside, I want to give a shout out to them. They did such an amazing job of taking care of us throughout the process of closing. They kept us very well informed, and they also flew us wherever we needed to go. So you didn't have to fly back to your home city. Like, we had 10 performers coming from New York on the same flight, and then flying back to New York, it was only 2 of us, you know, because people were subletting their places.
Right.
People didn't have places in New York anymore because they were like moving elsewhere, or, you know, the sublet situation was a big deal. It's like, I don't have anywhere to go, you know.
Right. Planned to be at Fireside way longer, so they had subletted their apartments for the duration of your contract. So then
we were there for 8-9 weeks. We're supposed to be.
So when they couldn't come back to New York to their apartment because they had a tenant essentially that was living there while you guys were supposed to be performing. Gotcha. Okay.
Right. So I flew back to Manhattan to this little 1-bedroom apartment with my boyfriend and my cat.
Was that Mark?
That was St. Patrick's Day. I think it was like the 17th or something like that.
Okay.
And then
how long you've been back in your apartment?
These walls are just
literally. Okay. 17.
But I love my apartment. It's a wonderful, wonderful apartment. And my boyfriend has been so patient with me because I literally transform our living room every single day.
Yes.
Either into a studio or a recording area, or, you know, a place to work on handstands, like all the craziness. I put a piano on our dresser, like, you know, he's very patient. And the cat, she's loving us being home, obviously. But I was in the apartment for 45 days without leaving. I didn't leave the building for 45 days. Decided that we needed a little bit of sunshine. So we live very close to Central Park. So we went outside and took a walk.
You did?
Yeah.
When was that?
Whenever 45 days after St. Patrick's Day was. And I think I've only left the apartment that one time. Just because you don't have to in New York. You know, we can get food delivered. We can get wine delivered. We can get whatever we need, you know, Amazon packages, all the things. And yeah, so I've been taking the opportunity during this time, and I want to share this with the next generation of dancers. We're in such a unique time right now that can seem very daunting, and it's not a good situation on paper. But one of the things that I think is incredible about artists is that we can transform a less than ideal situation into an opportunity. And I think that the artists are the people who are flourishing right now because we are staying creative. We are keeping up with our goals. And also I think that we're a bit more in touch with how we actually feel about everything than a lot of people, because there's often a lot of denial, what's actually happening, and then like, what's it going to be like when it's over? I would recommend to the next generation of dancers to give yourself a little bit of room, you know, like decompress, check in with yourself, try to find out how you really feel versus like what TikTok tells you how to feel, what Instagram tells you how to feel, heaven forbid what Facebook tells you how to feel. I think it's really important to have time to check in with yourself. And to be honest, after I left the Fireside, I took like a week and a half and I was just like,
I'm sad.
I was, you know, I was sleeping a lot and, you know, not being productive, which is very not Melissa, you know. But I gave myself that kind of grace period. And it was really important for me because once that happened, I was like, that's it. I am joining a fitness program. I'm buying a piano. I'm going to do this. I'm going to this, that, and the other. And so I sort of made a goal list, and it changes, you know, from month to month. So like the month of May, I did like a fitness program, and my goals were to do a lot of these industry interviews, right? So I was like, I'm going to focus on CDI. I'm going to focus on my health, and that's going to be my goal. And then for the following month, I said, okay, I'm going to do handstands every day. I'm going to play piano every day. And it doesn't have to be for a long time, but as long as I do those things, then that's part of my plan, right? I'm going to do ballet on Tuesdays, and I'm going to take a different kind of dance class on Thursdays. And then if I want to do more than that, great. If I don't feel like doing more than that, I don't have to.
Yeah.
And if there's a day that I just feel, you know, woe is me, lackadaisical, that's totally fine, because we're in such a weird situation that I'm allowing myself to not hustle if I don't have to.
Yeah. Well, oh my gosh, I cannot thank you enough for all of the content and editing and interviewing and making our feed look so pretty, which I know you have been working hard on, but everybody at CDI, faculty, students, we so appreciate the extra work you're doing to make sure that we're still training and that we're staying motivated. And I think you and I kind of sat down at the beginning of this and we're like, what do we need to do? There's a ton of dance classes online. How do we, you know, send CDI out to the world? And you and Cassidy have been just instrumental in, you know, what can we do creatively to kind of, you know, feel like what other information can we give you guys? So we've sort of had our online school with CDI. Right. Thank you for all of that, because you've been just instrumental in making that happen for all of us. So
absolutely. It's been such a treat to have, you know, these exciting creative tasks. And it's been a blessing for me because, you know, some people say like, oh, you just have to get up and do your hair and makeup and put on real clothes. And I was like, I'm a dancer. Like, I'm going to sweat. I'm going to put on leggings. And, right. you know, why put on makeup when you're going to sweat and my hair's in a top knot, whatever. Yeah. But there is something to be said for like getting glammed up if you want to. Like, I was really excited about today's interview. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going anywhere, but I'm going to put on my sparkly tank top because that makes me happy. Like checking in with what makes you happy and giving into that. Yeah. So good.
Done. I like slice my forehead trying to, I think I had to dry my hair last week for some random reason. And I like took a chunk out of my forehead because I don't remember how to dry my hair anymore because I like literally haven't dried my hair. I was like, I'm going to have to do a James Charles makeup tutorial just to do my 5-minute face because I don't know what that is. Like doing it. All right. So last official question, and this one was mine. It's the only contribution I made to your interviews. But my favorite podcast is How I Built This, which I've been obsessed with since it came out. So shout out to How I Built This. And so for your career so far, kind of everything that you've been doing, what % do you think is luck for your success? And what % do you think is talent and skill?
So I think that it changes based on your age. I think that if you are pre-college, I would say it's a lot more luck because I was lucky to be born into a family that had the means to get me to a dance studio 4 or 5 days a week. And I was lucky to be, you know, in a space where I felt cared for, and I was at a studio that had great technique. You know, if my mom had picked a different studio, I would have had a completely different trajectory, right? I'm lucky that my dance teacher called you in when I was 12 for like one weekend, and then that changed my entire life. You know, if it weren't for you, if it weren't for CDI, if it weren't for Miss Mary D. Brinkman and Susan Strain, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have the career that I have. So I would say like that's a large percentage when you're younger. I would, BB agrees. Like, I would say post-college, that dramatically decreases because all of the luck turns into you showing up for yourself. saying, I'm going to put myself out there and I'm going to apply to the work study program at Steps. I'm going to put myself out there and see if the Jerusalem Circus wants, to let me tumble in their space. I'm going to show up for this, benefit and meet this choreographer. It's because you decide to go there and you decide to take a risk. I mean, luck does happen, but I would say something like 25%, like when you're a professional. I would say for talent and skill, 75%, obviously. But I would translate that into dedication. I would say to continue to show up and be patient and do good work, no matter what the outcome is. That takes a lot of effort, and it's not for the faint of heart. I would say 75% talent and skill, but mostly because you continue to put in the work, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of showing up.
Yeah, a lot of showing.
And I would also keep showing up. I would also say to young dancers during this time, because of what we just talked about, is that treat this as a dress rehearsal, right? If you are living somewhere and you can't do the thing that you want to be doing, like I moved to New York, I want to be in a professional theater show, and I'm showing up to all these auditions and I'm doing the most and I'm not getting booked. How am I going to handle that? How am I going to handle not being able to do what I want to do? And what am I able to add into my daily practice to make, when I am ready, when I am booked, to be prepared, to show up and be ready to work, right? So taking this time, obviously with grace, if you don't feel well mentally, emotionally, physically, like pay attention to that first, because you need to be a healthy human first. But if you are like, oh, I'm stuck in Nowheresville, Idaho, and you're like, okay, well, what can you do where you are? How can you enhance what you can offer before you move to LA, before you move to New York, like all of those things? Like, what can you do to be prepared financially, mentally, artistically, physically? Like, all of those things are within your power. And so kind of gaining that control back, I think, is so important. And it gives you sort of that sense of inspiration,
For sure. Well, we are so appreciative to have you on the team. You've been with me since the beginning. Oh my God, so long ago. And, we always say that Cassie and I always back and forth, that I'm the brains behind CDI and he's the heart. But you are like the gears. Like if you open the door of CDI, like everything that goes on is Melissa. Like it's me saying, I really think that I want to do this. And Cassidy's saying like, and we can bring people together and do this. You're like, all right, how are we doing that? Hold on. I'll call you back. And then you're like, we need to do this. We got to call this. So like all of my ideas only come to fruition because you're like in there making everything happen and plugging in my phone. Little things that like I not at like 2 events because you were off living your life, working. And it was like, because
you probably didn't drink any water.
No water. My phone died. I didn't have the right cords. Like all of the stuff that you do behind the scenes, we appreciate you so much. And, Cassie and I are more the face of, CDI, but everything that happens is because of you, because there's no way that I could have built this or survived or come up with ways to make things happen. You were always 2 steps ahead of us. So we appreciate you so much. And so fun that you've been on this journey with us. Before I let you go, there's a tagline that we do, and I'm pretty sure you know it because it's your idea. Like, what?
Right. Ready?
So, yes, I'm ready.
My name is Melissa Strain. Are you ready to work?
That was really good. Okay, according to my cheat sheet, this is when I play a song and then we dance it out. Is that correct? Did I miss anything?
That is correct. You've done such a great job.
Some of them want to use you. Some of them want to get used by you.
Love you.
I love you.